When I was your age, have you made your first communion? Have you made your first communion? Yes? Okay. You look a little bit scared. Don't worry. When I was your age, I was a little bit scared too. When I was preparing for my first communion, my catechism teacher told me that this communion I am about to receive is bread from heaven. And so I put up my hand and I asked my catechism teacher, what does this bread taste like? And she told me it tastes like heaven. So I thought, then chocolate tastes like heaven. So this bread will taste like chocolate. I'm not joking, this is a true story. You like chocolate? So I thought chocolate tastes like heaven. So at our first communion practice, you know there's a practice that you do before your first communion. There I was lining up and they gave us this little wafer to practice. Do you do it here? Do you practice that? Yeah? And so there I was and they told me you kneel down, because at that time I knelt down, and then the priest will say the body of Christ, and you then receive it in your tongue. At that time I received it on my tongue. And it didn't taste like chocolate. So as a little kid, I told myself, oh, that's because this is practice. This is not consecrated. The priest did not bless this. He took it from the container. So I was looking forward to my first communion, and there I was, dressed in my white short pants, white shirt and a tie, and then I was ready to make my first communion, and I went up there and he said the body of Christ, and I was trembling, and then it didn't taste like chocolate. And I was very upset. I really was very upset, because I thought I must be the most sinful person that God did not allow me to taste heaven. Now you have asked me to come here on your feast day. This most sinful person, who could not taste heaven. I'm going to tell you another story of how, when I was not so little now, I was a little bit older, but I cannot see these young people here. Okay, I was a little bit older, and I used to live near Novena Church. And my mother asked me to go and get some holy water from the church. And so I walked over there with this bottle, and I was looking for the priest. And at that time, you could find priests in the church. And I saw this priest, and God rest him, he's Father Edmund Dunn. Do you know him? Yeah. And Father Edmund Dunn was there. He had just come out of the confessional, and I told Father Edmund Dunn, Father, I need some holy water. And he said, okay, follow me. So I followed him, and I was going to the CHRISTI with him. And as we passed the tabernacle, he genuflected. And I did not genuflect. And I just followed him. And he turned round, and before the Blessed Sacrament, he scolded me. He said to me, are you a Catholic? I said, yeah. Then he said, then why did you not kneel before the Blessed Sacrament? I said, I'm sorry, Father. And after that, I just made sure I knelt every time I passed the Blessed Sacrament. Why am I telling you this story? It's because for the longest time, I did not understand this sacrament. I did not understand what this adoration room was all about. The people who first taught me how to understand this great feast and this Blessed Sacrament was actually the FMM sisters. Believe it or not, it was the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary who, when I was a student friar, now let me work this out. When I was a student friar in Sri Lanka, invited me to adoration. And I told the sister, you know, I could never understand this sitting down in this chapel and just looking at the Blessed Sacrament. And then she told me, Michael, look closely. I was thinking, what am I going to find when I look closely? And she said, over in our convent, we break the host. It was not a full host, it was a broken host. And at that moment, the way God had allowed it, I began to see. I began to see that what I was actually in adoration of was the broken body of Jesus Christ. Was about His love that was broken for the world, and in all my encounters, the brokenness of the lives of people. So what I was in contemplation of was my own broken life, the lives of all the people who are broken, and the love of God that was broken. And then I sat for hours thinking of all the people that I met in the mission, the lives of these people, and my own brokenness before the love of God broken. But the one story that gave me the greatest impact in this was the life of this bishop, Oscar Romero. I don't know if you know his story, but you can get the video, you can read his story online. And there was a movie made of that story, and it's a true story. And in one of the scenes, you first must know who this man is. He was a sickly young bishop. He was a bishop of El Salvador. This might ring a bell for those of you watching the World Cup, where one of the stadiums is San Salvador. And it was there, not in that stadium, but in this country, this small little country, El Salvador, that it was a terrible time in the 1900s. Because why? The politics of the country was such that about 14, they say 14, but it might be a bit more, 14 families control the economy of all the people. Their greatest asset was in indigo and in coffee. And you know what? All the people were poor, working in the farms, and it was just the select rich who control the lives of his people to mere slavery. Cut the long story short, there were rebellions and the government came down hard and instituted martial law. This young man, the church unfortunately was part of this whole thing. But when they chose this man to be a bishop, they thought he would just keep quiet. And he was a scared man. He was a sickly man. And what happened was that as he saw the people being killed and martyred by the rich and the powerful, he had to speak up. Eventually, because he began to speak up, they began to take over the churches and turn it to military operation rooms. So one of the instances was when they took over the main church in the village. And there, they kicked out the people and they sat down like you, they were seated down as military martial law people, couldn't care about the other people. And what happened was, he was bishop and he felt he needed to save the Blessed Sacrament. So he came and they didn't allow him into the church. And he said he has come to protect, to save the Blessed Sacrament. So he walks up. He walks up, and as he walks, remember he's a scared man. They are shooting around him, and he's trembling, and he's walking up to the tabernacle, and they fire the shots around him, and he collapses. And he picks up the hose, and in a very frightened way, he walks out. And as he walks out, he sees out there all the people just looking at him, lost without a shepherd, just wondering what to do. They are just poor, taken advantage. They were made to be slaves. They were not part. They did not get any. And he looked at the people and realized that actually, while he was trying to save the Blessed Sacrament here, that act is connected to him being the voice of the people and saving God's people there. And that is when I began to slowly understand the mystery of this sacrament.